Name of the talk tonight is Navigating Life's Challenges Through the Stories of Our Ancestors. How's my volume? Is that okay? Great, okay. So it's an interesting thing because a lot of times when you think about biblical stories, you think, oh, they're nice, you tie them up in a bow, everybody fits in a box, everybody's righteous, everybody behaves the way they're supposed to behave, and these are the people we're supposed to learn from, and it's so complex, kind of like our lives, complex. Like sometimes we think we're doing the right thing and we find out that we've blundered in a big way. And that's what happens sometimes to the people in the Torah also. So we're going to take these complex stories that are written for us for all eternity and say, where did they fall? Where did they have pain? And what did they use to remedy their pain? And then we can take, and there's an interesting thing. As I was going through this, and I thought, we kind of know all of the answers. Like, I don't think I'm going to tell anybody anything new tonight, really. I think everybody already has intrinsically. But there's this interesting thing, when a martial artist first starts as a white belt, when somebody first starts learning martial arts, so they start out learning just the basics, right? You learn, in martial arts, you learn a front punch and a side whatever, and a side kick and a front kick, and you learn all these basic moves. And what does a black belt do? The exact same things, only he's a master or she is a master at it. So they're still doing the same things, but they're doing it in a more complex way, but the same moves. So even though you probably already, it's not going to be new, the remedies aren't going to be new to you, but I think there's, at least for me in my journey with all of these teachings, is as I mature, I can take each teaching a little bit deeper. So I'm going to challenge us all to go a little bit deeper with everything that I'm saying. Some of the things that I talk about that may be new to you are some of the stories. So the stories, the people that I'm talking about are some of them more common, like people that you've heard of, and maybe some that you haven't really studied their stories before. And I'm not doing them in the order of importance. I'm doing them in chronological order, the order they appear in the Tanach. So everybody understands what Tanach is. Tanach is an acronym for Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, which are the three sort of the big bodies that we have. So the Torah are the 5 books of Moses, the Nevi'im are the prophets, and the Ketuvim are the writings. So that would include like the Scroll of Ruth, which we're going to be reading for Shavuot, Scroll of Esther, and some other books too. Okay, so what we're going to talk about, each section that I'm going to talk about is, we'll have each of the characters and the stories that I talk about. I will talk about what is their story, what is their pain, and how do they remedy their pain, and maybe some takeaways that we can have for that. One factor in all of what we're studying tonight is there's the way we react to what happens in our lives, right? We have the way we relate to what's happening. But then we've also got this mysterious part, and that's the God part. And what is God thinking? Like, why? We can't really answer that. We have some answers. We can take some pieces of what God's thinking. Like when somebody has pain in their life, sometimes it's because there's a past life and we have to do some repair work from another life. So there will come like payback time, so that we've got to work on something. And sometimes it's not about that. Sometimes it's because on a soul level we have growing to do, and pain brings you to growth. And we'll talk about that more as we go in the stories. And a lot of times we can see this firsthand. The way it works in our lives is that sometimes something happens to us that we didn't like and we didn't want and we wish didn't happen, and yet because of that exact pain, it took us to a place of being that we couldn't have gotten to without that pain. So sometimes our pain is just about shaping us to be something better. There's this wonderful mashal, this wonderful parable about how the silversmith makes silver. Have you heard this before? So the silversmith takes silver, and when you get silver from the earth, it's full of impurities. So the way that you get the impurities out is you heat it hot, you burn it. And what happens when you burn it is you're burning off the impurities, right? And how does the silversmith know when it's pure? When he can see his reflection. So we're kind of like the silver, and we kind of, Hashem is burning off the impurities and until he sees his reflection. Okay, I'm just going to say, everybody understands that God is not a man. When I say God, it doesn't mean that God is a man. Is everybody familiar with this? The word in Hebrew that we use for God, it consists of 4 letters. The Yud, the K, the Vav, the K. When you take those 4 letters and rearrange them, you get Haya, Hoveh, Yihya, which means what was, what is, and what will be. So that's what God is really. That which was, that which is, that which will be. It's so much bigger. It's infinite. We can't comprehend it. So because we're finite, we use he. And so whenever I use he, or you get what that's just like the common metaphor that we all use. So when we're tested by God, so why does God test us? So this is a really interesting question. It was a big revelation for me when I learned this. God tests us, why? So we can, so he can see if we're going to pass. But what we have to remember is that God is God. God already knows if we're going to pass or not. So God isn't testing us so that he can see if we're going to pass that test. He's testing us so we can see what our own capacity is. It's a big wow, isn't it? It's a big paradigm shift. So when we get a test, we're only tested in a way that we already can pass. God doesn't test us in a way that we can't pass. So that's a big wow. I talked about how our ancestors were complex, and as complex as they were, as much as they had pain in their lives, this is another thing that gets talked about a lot. Like in Judaism, we have a lot of pain in our history. And right now, I feel like the pain is getting a lot of attention, and maybe too much attention. And there is a lot of pain in our history, and we rise. And so, but the thing is, okay, so one of the teachings, I was going to say this at the end, but I'll say it now. The Ramchal talks about that the natural state of a human being is to spiral down, to just sink. And for those of you that spend too much time on the internet like me, and you go on YouTube, you can just see right over there in that right-hand column, you can just go into the toilet. That will give you, like the grossest videos will just pop up for you to follow. And you got to be really careful to not let that morbid curiosity thing and all those gross things, you could go, you could just go down. Why does YouTube do that? Probably because it's the natural thing for people to want to click, and for the money, because it's a natural thing. Listen, if there was money in elevating people, I guarantee you they'd be putting all these wonderful videos. And if there was money in elevating people, the news would be amazing. Mm-hmm. So it's because they're tapping into that natural propensity for people to want to go down. So the Ramchal, and he's not the only one that teaches, we have to rise on purpose. We have to rise on purpose. So that's part of what this class is, to see how did our ancestors do it? How did these people face their challenges, face their blunders, and then rise? Okay. Now, each one of these things that I'm talking about, I have 6 stories that I'm going to tell. And one of the stories that involves 2 people in particular, and each one of these stories could be 5 classes on its own. So I am scratching the surface just to give you like a thumbnail sketch of what these stories are, and so that we can just tap into them. But I think it's kind of exciting that way. And then we've got this amazing resident rabbi in Rebbitzin who can set up classes and take you deeper into these topics and these characters. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is Leah. And Leah is one of the matriarchs. She's one of the 4 matriarchs. Let me see just who's familiar with the story of Leah. Okay. So Avraham and Sarah are the first matriarch and patriarch. Then they have a child named Yitzchak, and Yitzchak marries Rivka, the second matriarch and patriarch. They have a child named Yaakov. Remember, I'm leaving a lot of stuff out. They have a child named Yaakov. And I use the Hebrew names. I'll say that, try to sprinkle in the English names. I really like using the Hebrew names better. So Yaakov is Jacob. And Jacob goes to work for his father-in-law, who's not a good guy. And his father-in-law has two daughters, Rachel and Leah. And Jacob falls for Rachel, and he wants to marry Rachel. And he says to his father-in-law, I'll work for 7 years to earn the right to marry her. So on the wedding night, Jacob makes up these secret codes with Rachel to make sure, because his father-in-law is not a straight guy. So he says, we're going to have a secret code. You're going to be under the veils. I want to know it's really you under the veils. So here's the secret password, so I know it's really you. She says, okay. And then she feels like her sister is going to be humiliated. If she doesn't know the secret codes, she'll be humiliated in front of the whole community. And it was a big, big affair. So she gives over the secret code to her sister. Some people say she just told it outright. Some people say, there's some commentators that say she just made a conversation so that it would come into her awareness, and that Leah didn't even know she was getting the secret codes. That's another one of the interpretations. Leah and Yaakov get married, and in the morning light, Yaakov sees it's Leah and says, are you kidding me? You did this? And you deceiver? And she's like, well, it takes one to know one, because there's a whole story with Yaakov that he did also a kind of a deception for a higher good. And he goes to his father-in-law and he says, what did you do? And he says, okay, well, you can work another 7 years for Rachel. But there's like a week of celebration after a wedding. So Rachel and Yaakov married after that week of celebration. And he didn't say, I want my money back, you take Leah. Yaakov, he's one of our patriarchs, and he knew through this, what we call Ruach HaKodesh, from this very high level. It's so nice to see you guys. I didn't say a formal hello. That he knew that this was no accident. He knew that this was a setup from God himself, that he also married Leah. So there's more to this story of the dynamic between Jacob and Rachel and Leah. In the meantime, Leah knows that he loves Rachel more. So here's the pain of feeling rejected, okay? It's her husband. We have evidence that Yaakov loved Leah also. But in the Torah, Leah is called the hated wife. The hated wife. How painful is that? Rabbi Ari Kahn talks about that it doesn't say that anywhere that Yaakov hated Leah. So he suggests that perhaps Leah perceived that she was the hated wife. No place does it say that he hated her. It's not there. There's evidence that he loved her. But she felt like they call it the hated wife. So there's the pain, this pain of rejection and feeling low, maybe feeling less than. So what's the remedy? Leah has 6 sons altogether. She has her 4th son, when she has 1, 2, 3, when she has her 4th son, she names her 4th son Judah. And the root of the name Yehuda is gratitude, thankful. She's the first character in the whole Torah to express gratitude. So what we learn from Leah is gratitude. And we are called Yehudim in Hebrew, which is Jews. The word Jew comes from the root Yehudi, which means grateful. So that's the name of our nation, the grateful ones. So we have a really big clue here about the first level of dealing with pain, and that is to go into gratitude. So there are 2 levels of gratitude that I'm going to talk about. You do want me to go over an hour, is that correct? Um, the first thing is that we have a prayer that we say every morning, Moda'ani, which means thank you. I am so grateful. We wake up in the morning. Did anybody see the movie Avatar? Okay, so there's this scene in Avatar where there's this guy who's paralyzed from the waist down. He can't move, and he goes into and he's in a wheelchair, and he goes into this Avatar body that's a whole body. So his whole spirit goes into this new, perfect, amazing body. So he wakes up in this new body, and he's like, what? What? And he starts moving, he starts jumping, and it's like he's been in a wheelchair for all this time, and he's got this body, and he's jumping. And I looked at that, and I'm like, that's how we need to wake up every morning. We're every morning reanimated. That's what Moda'ani is like. What? I can walk again today? Wow. And so I'm going to fall over. So there's this kind of gratitude for what we're given, for all the good that we're given. There's an exercise that I learned, and I challenge you to do this exercise every night, to write down. I don't always write it down, but to think of 10 things that you've never said thank you for. So before you go to sleep, you say 10 things I never said thank you for. Because it's so easy to say, oh yeah, I thank God for my kids. I thank God for my house. It's easy to, and we're grateful for those things every day. But to fine tune it, so to say, instead of I'm grateful for my husband, I can say I'm really grateful for the great time that we had walking today. So that, because we never had that walk before. It's a new walk. It was a new day. So, the nuances in our eyes, I'm so grateful that I have rods and cones and I can see colors in the back, that I have that. So all the nuances we can say thank you for. Now here's the hard part. Are you ready? Nobody yell at me, just sit with it for a while. The idea is to say thank you for the pain. Thank you for what hurts. Thank you for what's hard. Right, it's hard to process that. So, I heard that idea that there's this revealed good. So something really nice happens and it's good and I can see that it's good. And sometimes there's what we could call concealed good. So something happens and it looks like it was not so good. It looks bad. But if we go a little longer in the story, we'll see that it really turned out to be good. There's a story that's in this book about a farmer and a son. And the son left the gate open to the barn, and one horse ran out and was lost. And all the townspeople said, oh, what a shame, how terrible. And the farmer said, good, bad, who knows? So short time later, the horse comes back with 5 wild horses following him right into the barn. And the whole town said, wow, that's amazing. The farmer said, good, bad, who knows? Well, the son was now taming one of those horses, and he fell off and broke his leg. And the townspeople said, oh, what a terrible tragedy. And the farmer said, good, bad, who knows? The very next day, the draft came to take all the eligible young men to war. But because his leg was broken, he didn't go to war. Good, bad, who knows? So you see, we don't always have the whole picture. And believe me, I can't even pretend to have the whole picture. But practice, it's like this amazing thing when something really hard happens to say, thank you. I have one friend, and she always talks about, one of it's like her joke that she used to say was, I'm really grateful for the things God hasn't given me. Mm-hmm. So that was an interesting one too. Okay, so that's the story of Leah, and gratitude is the remedy. And we talked about how to do that. It's an experiment. See what happens. The next story I want to tell you is about 2 people, Yehuda and Tamar. And this is one of my scariest stories to tell, because it's so puzzling and it's so uncomfortable and it's so deep. So I'm going to brave it and I'm going to tell it. I did not write about Tamar in the book because I was that afraid to tell the story. Now I'm braver. So I'll just tell the story, but it's not written. So what's the story of Tamar and Yehuda? So fast forward. So Yehuda is the son of Leah. You've all seen maybe the Lion of Yehuda. He was really in a very high leadership role in our tribal nation, and Tamar was given to his oldest son. They were married, Tamar and Yehuda's oldest son. His son was not so righteous. He was not so good. He did things that warranted a death penalty from God. Nobody knew about it. Only Tamar knew about it, and the son, about what his misconduct was, and God takes his life. So the way that it works in Jewish law is that when a man dies without an heir, without leaving an heir, so his brother, his next in line, will marry her. So the next son marries her, and he does the same thing. And so he also merits from God to be killed. Now, Yehuda doesn't know what's going on. We have the big picture, we have the perspective, but Yehuda doesn't. He thinks this woman is a jinx, and all my sons are dying because of her. He has one son left. The last son is a little too young to get married, so he says to Tamar, "Go home to your father's house. Wait there till my third son grows up." He has no intention of giving his third son to her. Tamar knows through some level of prophecy that from her union with the line of Yehuda, a very special heir is going to come. It actually comes the line of Mashiach. So she does something very puzzling. She dresses up during the harvesting season. She dresses as a prostitute, and she waits by the side of the road. And Yehuda is coming by, and why is Yehuda going to a prostitute? I mean, really? There's a midrash that explains that an angel pushed him. This is not normal behavior for him. This is really not what his nature was. But so the best way I can understand it is, have you ever done something, and after you did it, you go, "What was I thinking? What?" I mean, we have a story. We lost 40,000 shekels. Like what? Like we were too smart. How did that happen? So we're just gonna chalk it up to that, and we're not going to spend too much time dwelling on this. But this is one of the reasons why it's really hard. There's another story that says that when something very, very profound and important is going to happen, if it's coming straight on out in the view. So the Yetzer Hara, this force that comes in to kind of mess things up, if this really powerful thing is happening directly, so this force, this negative force, is going to come at it. But if it looks like it's already a negative thing,
evil inclination.
Yes, right. So if it looks already like it's crooked, so this force says, I don't have to bother with that. It's already a mess over there. I'm not going to bother with it. So Tamar dresses as a prostitute, so he can't see his daughter-in-law, not like he was spending a lot of time hanging out with her anyways, and he has relations with her. And then the way we tell children, I'll just explain to you because it's kind of sweet. At the end, he says, "Okay, so what do you want for your pay?" And she says, "Well, I want whatever this amount is." And he says, "Well, I can't give it to you now, but I'll leave something as collateral. What do you want me to leave?" "Your signet ring, your cloak, and your staff." "Okay, fine." So he sends his. So what do we tell children? We don't tell them that she dresses as a prostitute. We have a children's version, we have a grown-up version. Same thing for the story of Purim, just in case you have not heard the grown-up version. It's in the book, and the Shiners will tell you the grown-up version. So what we tell children is, they had chasana by the side of the road. They used his cloak, they used his staff as the poles, and they used his ring. So they got married, basically, is what we'll tell children. They got married by the side of the road. So what happens is Tamar gets pregnant, which was the plan. But she's not supposed to be pregnant. She's supposed to be waiting for this young son, right? And she begins to show. And now that she's showing, it looks like she did something very illegal by being with somebody outside of their family. And what she's facing now is the death penalty. And so they go to Yehuda, who's the leader, and say, this is what happened. He's like, death penalty, okay, that's what we got to do. And she sends now so I left a little part out. So he goes to send her payment, and she's, of course, not by the side of the road. And his helper, who goes looking for her, goes into the nearby tavern and says, where's that prostitute that always hangs out on that corner? And they're like, there's no prostitute that hangs out on that corner. So he says, okay, it's already been a big embarrassment, so let's just leave it. So now we're back, fast forward. They see that Tamar is showing, and they're going to kill her. So there's this humiliation that Tamar is facing now, because she's being accused of something wrong. That she didn't do anything wrong, but she's being accused of it. So what's her remedy for that humiliation? Silence. She didn't say anything. She didn't stand up for herself. She didn't say, by the way, this is Yehuda's baby. She just is silent. So there's a grace in what she's doing. Now I'm going to tell you something very, very powerful. You know, when I talk about silence, I don't talk about silence when if you see a wrong happening, you don't stay silent. But if something is happening to you there are times when you need to speak up for yourself. There are times when you have to set boundaries. So this is just one of the tools. But the idea is that when you see an injustice, you speak up. But if somebody just calls you a name and you keep silent, so Rabbi Nachman of Breslov has a very powerful teaching. He said, when somebody says something that is humiliating to you, and you keep silent, in that moment, the heavens are opening up for you. Ask for what you want. There are stories. There's one story of a woman who went to a rabbi for a blessing. They were childless, and they really wanted a baby. And they asked the rabbi, can you give us a blessing for a baby? He said, I can't give you the blessing, but I'll tell you who can. Somebody who you see is being humiliated, and they don't answer, that person has a power. That's who you want to ask. She goes to a wedding. It's an Israeli wedding, right? So there's always a balagan, we say. There's always like something, somebody saves a place and somebody else, you can't save that place. There's always some kind of a thing happening. And this lady was supposed to sit in this one place, and another lady starts really yelling at her in a not very nice way. So the other lady stays silent. Well, the woman who wants the blessing for the baby runs over to her. And as she approaches her, she sees the woman taking a deep breath to answer. And she grabs her and says, please don't answer. I need your blessing. She told her the situation. The woman blessed her, and she had a baby. So this is so powerful. I mean, I could tell you more stories, so many more stories like this. So this is the power of staying silent in the face of humiliation. But let's talk about Yehuda's side of this. So what happens, the rest of the story? So now Tamar is facing this death penalty. And they say, well, do you have anything to say? And she says, yes. She takes the cloak, the staff, and the signet ring, and she sends them to Yehuda, and she says, do you recognize these? Okay, there's something even deeper, which is, I don't know if you know the story of Joseph, and does anybody know the story of Joseph? So, okay, if you don't know the story already, I'm not going to go into the whole story because we'll never leave. But when they threw Joseph into a pit and they played him as dead, and they bring his coat to their father with some goat blood on it, and they say, Dad, do you recognize this coat? And the father says, oh my God, it's my son's coat. So now, and where does the story of Yehuda and Tamar come? Exactly in the middle of the story of Joseph. So what happens? Yehuda is given these garments, and the same line that he said to his own father is said to him, do you recognize these? And in that moment, he has this spark of knowing. Now, he had a choice right there. He could have kept his mouth shut and said nothing and put her to death and saved himself from his own humiliation. But in that moment, he rose and he said, I recognize that baby is mine. And in that moment of rising up and fessing up, can you imagine how humiliating that was for Yehuda to admit? In that great moment, they say, was the spark of Messiah, Mashiach. So So here is and we're going to go from here, from this spark, from that baby is going to come the descendant of King David, and we're going to get to that story next. So the other aspect of humiliation is the humiliation when we feel like we've done something that we're so embarrassed about, and then the remedy for that is to rise up. And in that rising comes something so powerful and so healing. Okay, everybody with me? Have I like blown anybody out yet, or you have room for more in there? Okay. The next one is Aharon, or Aaron. Aaron was Moses' brother. So we all know who Moses was, yes? Everybody knows who Moses was. So Moses was the one that went to Pharaoh, and he said, let my people go. And when he first was getting involved in the whole story, with the burning bush, he's like, I can't do this. God says, yes, you can. No, I don't want to do it. Yes, you can do it. I can't even talk. Okay, fine, bring your brother Aharon. So Aharon becomes his mouthpiece. He becomes his voice. And Aharon also becomes the high priest. So Aharon is given this very, very high honor to represent us in the Holy of Holies. And Aharon faces something. I'm not going to cry. Aharon faces a very big loss when his sons decide that they want to take a sacrifice in. They want to take an incense sacrifice. Incense is the purest sense we have. And they want to take the sense in, and instead of God taking the incense, God takes them. So at this time, this incredible time for our nation, Aaron loses two of his sons. We don't even want to think about what that kind of a loss is like. And he's grieving. We read a story about somebody else losing a child, we cry, right? Lo Aleinu should never have an experience like that. So part of what happens is, and I'm gonna read this. So obviously Aharon is in deep grief. And Moses says to him in a comforting way, of this not that we're going to understand it, but I just want you to hear it, because there's something in those words you'll feel it, even if we don't understand it. Of this did Hashem speak, saying, I will be sanctified through those who are nearest me. Okay, God. And before the entire people, I will be glorified. And Aharon held his peace. So we're translating, and Aharon held his peace. What does that mean? So there's three different interpretations about this. How to deal with the biggest losses. One of them was silence. It's a different kind of a silence. It's an introspective and deep silence. It's a different silence than what Tamar was doing. We all understand how silence can come in different. Silence can also be used as a weapon to hurt somebody. So this we're talking about now is a deep kind of a introspective silence. The second interpretation of that is that Aharon had quiet praise. So his silence was that when Moshe said these words to him, that Aharon knew and trusted and understood that God was doing what was the highest, best, right thing to do, and he actually praised God. It doesn't mean that he didn't have pain from the loss, but that was his remedy for that pain, was to go into quiet praise. And the third thing that they talk about is this still small voice, that he heard something in that silence that was very powerful. And from this place that Aharon went to, this quiet or silent place in his grief, when he just went into that place of acceptance and peace, that he was in a position of very, very high revelation. So typically we talk about that Moses wasn't really speaking everything because he was so directly relating to God. But Aharon had sort of a level of separation, so he was in a position to speak more. And in that moment, he was at the level of Moshe. So so this incredible idea of being able to grieve, and I want to tell you another story. Well, that the next piece is that we're commanded to serve God with joy. It says in Hebrew, Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha, serve God with joy. So how do you serve God with joy when sometimes there's like really these painful things going on? So the idea is that service is avodah. That's what service is. So that's what the high priest or the Kohen Gadol is. He's doing avodah. He's doing service work. We go to synagogue, going to services. Are you going to services? So what does that mean, services? Because we're serving God. That's where that whole word comes from. So there had to be this idea that then, from this terrible loss, Aharon had to turn around and do the service of God on behalf of the nation, and you can only do that from a place of joy. So now I'm going to tell you a story that is a little more, maybe we can comprehend it and not comprehend it at the same time. So there was a terrorist attack some years ago where a man and his son were killed. And it happened to be that the daughter and the sister of this father and son was getting married. So they buried the two, and the couple decided they're not going to let the terrorists stop the joy of their nation. They invited all of the nation of Israel to come. They got married in a huge convention center, and there were so many thousands of people that the streets were full. They couldn't even all fit in.
Like a doctor?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so there's a woman named Rabbanit Yamima. She's an Israeli teacher who's fantastic. And she tells the story that she went into the wedding, and everybody knows Rabbanit Yamima. She goes into the wedding, and the mother of the bride, so she lost the woman who lost her husband and her son, and now she's at her daughter's wedding. And she looked at Rabbanit Yamima and she said, "I'm so joyful, and I'm so sad." And Rabbanit Yamima said, that is what it is to be a Jew, to be a human, to be a woman, is that we can contain such joy and such sadness. We can embody that paradox. So I can only kind of try to imagine what that was for Aharon to have had such a great loss. The Torah doesn't talk so much about emotions, but we sure know that there are emotions. Sometimes we get hints afterwards. You can find a whole talk about this on the internet. Okay, so that's Aharon. So the pain is grief, and the remedy is this deep silence and trust. Next is the story of Hannah. So Hannah is her story is in Shmuel Aleph, in the book of Samuel. So Hannah suffered infertility, and so her story is very well known. Now, it's a story of infertility, but what I want to say about infertility is that we can look at that story and call it lack. So there's something in our life like that we lack. There's something in our life that we wish we had, or something in our life that we crave. Whatever it is, it's going to be different for each of us. For Hannah, she wanted a baby, and that was what her whole life was focused around. So her story is that she marries a great guy. I'm going to leave a lot of her story out. So for those of you who know the story, we'll never get through all of this if I tell her whole story. But so I'm just going to tell like some of the key threads of her story. So she really wants a baby. Her husband is a really great and righteous guy, and he's like, "Come on, I'm better than 10 babies. Let's go have a feast." And he's so great. He takes these parades to the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. And they take every year, this is their reputation, they take a different route. And it's like road trip party. We're going to the Beit HaMikdash. We're going to go. So and they would, have these beautiful, it was such an attractive party that people would be like, "Oh yeah, I'll go with you." And so their crowd would grow and grow and grow. And so every year they'd take a different route, so they'd get more and more people that they would go to this wonderful thing. So they were, or the Mishkan, I guess we didn't have the Beit HaMikdash then, right? Not yet. To the Mishkan, to the sanctuary. And Hannah goes in there, and she's bargaining with God. Her story includes this bargaining where she talks to God. She threatens God. She said, God, I'm gonna do sota. It's like this whole ritual where a woman is accused of adultery, and then if she's found innocent, so then God promises, okay, fine, then I'll give you a baby. So she's like, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna go seclude myself. How do you give me a womb without giving me a baby? How do you do this? You have to. And she's pleading with God and bargaining with God, and she's in this holy sanctuary, and the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, named Eli, sees her and thinks she's drunk, and says, why are you coming in here drunk? Get out. And she says, oh no, I'm not drunk. I need a baby. When he understands what's happening, he blesses her that she should have a baby. What we learn from Hannah, her pain is lack or infertility, and her remedy is prayer. What we learn from Hannah is the whole Jewish nation today prays because of Hannah. Hannah was our example of how to pray, so we've all learned how to pray from her. How do we pray? We move our lips and we make a sound so that our ear can hear it. It doesn't have to be, and nobody else has to hear it, but we at least have to hear our own words. So what's beautiful about prayer is that you can pray in any language, and I want to just tell you, you can't bother God. You could ask for the smallest detail, ask for everything, and the more you ask for, the better. So I want to tell you the parts of prayer so that you can take this home and put it in your pocket. I'm going to use the way that Lori Polotnik teaches about it. She calls it RPAT. So you have these 4 letters. So the R stands for recognize. The first part of prayer is to recognize who you're addressing. You're addressing the creator of the world, the divine, the oneness, that which is, was, and will be. And recognize, first of all, who you're speaking with. The second part, P, is praise. So the really, like, when we're breaking down what we're doing verbally, the first thing that we're doing is praising God. We're not buttering up God. Why do we praise God? God doesn't need our praise, right? God doesn't need us to say, oh, Master of the world, you're so big, you're so good. But we need to hear it because we need to remind ourselves exactly, we have to remember before who we're standing. What is this? So that's P. The second part is ask. So if you're praying to God, part of what you do as part of you to qualify it as a prayer is you ask for something. So what do you want to ask for? It can be you can ask for a parking spot, you can ask for a baby, you can ask for a spouse, you can ask for healing, you could pray for somebody else's healing, everything, ask for everything. One of the interesting things that was shocking and amazing to me was that when we ask for something, who are we doing that for, us or God? When we ask for something, we're really giving God something because God is the giver and we're the receivers. So when we ask, we have opened a channel for God to do what God does and give to us. So like on Yom Kippur, we know God's going to forgive us, but we have to ask. Why? Because that asking opens the channel. And maybe it opens the channel for us to forgive ourselves. And maybe that opens the channel for us to forgive everybody else. And maybe when we ask God, we're opening up a channel for us to receive something. So when we ask, we're actually doing that for God. The last part of prayer is to say thank you. So that's the PAT, praise, ask, thank. So the T is to thank God. And who are we thanking God for? For us. So the idea is that when we say thank you, we're recognizing once again where our gifts are coming from. That it wasn't because, like Lori Polotnik tells a story about this kid who was a really, really good, she was from Toronto originally, and she tells a story about this kid who was really good at hockey. And so she said to the kid, don't be so full of yourself. Yeah, God gave you that talent, and you're using it. That's great. And God gave your parents enough money so that they could afford skates and lessons and. So don't just be all full of yourself because you have a talent. Understand that your talent came from somewhere and that other people have helped you do this. So this idea of saying thank you is to recognize really how small we are and how great creation is. So that is the story of Hannah. And we started late, so for sure it's okay if I end a little bit later, right? So I have two more characters. Are you guys doing okay?
Yes.
I'm not. Everybody's okay. Okay, good. Would you tell me if it was too much? Okay.
Your husband's there. He probably would.
I practiced this in the car on the way here, but he got a very short version. The next woman that I want to tell you about is Ruth. So Ruth is what the story that we read the scroll of Ruth for this holiday that's coming up, the holiday of Shavuot. Shavuot is the holiday where we receive the 10 Commandments, and what's really cool about it is that it wasn't historical. It was historical, but it's also present day. So even when we're celebrating Shavuot now, we're getting it again right now. It's like, have you heard about this idea of life as a spiral? Have you seen that video that shows how our solar system is traveling through space? You should come up here and talk about this. So we're like, like the Earth is rotating around the sun, but then there's like this whole spiral, right? We're traveling through the universe in this spiral thing. So what we talk about is that the spiral that we're doing, even just the way that the Earth is moving, we're rotating, but we're not exactly rotating exactly to the same space. We're rotating to the same space, but higher. So what we're doing is we're coming back to the giving of the Torah from a higher place, and from a higher place, and from a higher place. So every time that we come back to this date, it's like happening again at a higher level. So Ruth is the story we read at this time. So what's Ruth's story? Again, I'm giving you the Reader's Digest version. Ruth was a Moabite princess. So now the thing about Moab, the land of Moab, was that it was very depraved. So there was a lot of cruelty. Star Wars. You can see I'm such a media person. Is there anybody that didn't see Star Wars? Okay, so then you won't get this joke, but that's okay.
Okay.
So Ruth's father, you remember Jabba the Hutt in Star Wars? He was like this depraved, evil slug, right? So Ruth's father was named Eglon, and he was like Jabba the Hutt. He was huge and depraved, and Ruth was his daughter. Eglon has a whole other story. It's really interesting, but you got to come back to the Chiners to get all the stories. So Ruth is one of his daughters, and there's another daughter also named Orpah that we'll talk about. And we're not going to talk about her so much. So these two daughters. So Naomi and her husband, Naomi's husband. There was a big famine in Israel, and what is his name? Elimelech. No, Elchanan. Elimelech. Okay. So Elimelech, he's very, very wealthy, and he can't deal with everybody knocking on his door in the famine. Like, the way that I learned it is that people could knock on his door, and the best, most compassionate thing is to just give them any little thing and a kind word. But he couldn't deal with people banging down his doors, so he left the land of Israel. He took his wife and his 2 sons, and they went to Moab, of all places. Naomi didn't really want to leave. If you study on Shavuot the story, you'll hear also Naomi's story within this. But they go to Moab, and they're 2 brilliant kind of royal sons. They were kind of royals of the Jewish nation. And these 2 women, Ruth and Orpah, marry these 2 Jewish men. And fast forward, all the husbands die. Naomi's husband and the 2 sons die. So now Naomi's like, I have nothing left, I'm going back. And these 2 daughter-in-laws come to her and they say, we're not leaving you. And she's like, there's no reason for you to stay. I have another son to give you? Even if I got pregnant again, even if I could get married and get pregnant, there's no time. Go back to your parents' house. So they're like, no. And they follow her, and she's like, go back. So Orpah goes, okay. And she leaves. Ruth turns to Naomi and says, where you go, I will go. Your people are my people. Your laws are my laws. I will live like you live, and I will die like you die. So now Ruth is going back with Naomi. She takes on the mantle of a Jewish life, and going from a Moabite princess, what do you think a princess grows up like, especially from a king like Eglon? You think she gets everything she asks for? Now she's in rags. They walk from Moab back to Bethlehem, back to Bethlehem, back to the land of Israel. They come back as paupers. So Ruth's story is a story of personal loss. She went from riches to rags, and she lost everything. So her pain is this idea of loss. What's the remedy? Her remedy is her faith. Her faith. I don't like the word faith in English, because in English it's like blind faith, right? In Hebrew we have a word called emunah. Emunah is this rich, holographic version of our relationship with trusting the process of life, trusting God. So there's this idea of trust that comes into it. So Ruth's walk is one more step. I'm going to stay on this path, and I'm going to do it with great emunah, with great faith. So the idea, so that's her remedy. Ruth, at one point, she marries in the land of Israel, and then the next day after the wedding night, her husband dies. So now she's twice a widow, but she's pregnant. And who does she give birth to? She gives birth to the grandfather of Mashiach, of King David. King David. So Ruth now has become the great-grandmother of King David. So her great faith, her great walk, her great trust built her on the inside. Does this make sense to people? That it's sort of like that hardship that builds us up, that pain that builds us up. And yet, listen, it's not like every day is a big drag, but she's missing some things here. But she gives birth to this incredible soul to create this incredible lineage. So also on Shavuot, we have the yahrzeit of King David. So I'm going to end with King David's story. And again, there's like so much written about King David. So I'm giving you just the tiniest scratch of the surface. Does everybody know that King David wrote the Psalms? So King David wrote these poems. Somebody didn't really like it that I said it like this, but to me, it's like the original ultimate poetry slam. We've got these these are incredible words. I can't really understand them. I say them, and I kind of, if I look at the English, I understand what the words in English mean. And occasionally there's one little line that will jump out at me. But it's kind of this mystical experience. If you do it every day, something starts to happen and something starts to stir in the process of it. And there's a depth in these Tehillim. These Tehillim have been around for thousands of years, and they're still current. We're still saying them in our lives. So what is that? What is that mystery? So what is it? The word Tehillim means to praise. So King David wrote these thousands-year-old praises of God. Now, that's the remedy. I gave you the remedy first. What's his story? Oh my gosh. So I see one head nodding. There's a few people that know the pain that this kid grew up with. He grew up in his home. It's a crazy story, but his mother was accused of infidelity, and so he was considered a bastard. He wasn't. That's a whole other. That's the story of Nitzevet. That's a women's class. We'll talk about that another time. So he grows up, and they basically push him to the side, and they're terrible to him. He's got these amazing, wonderful older brothers, but he's like pushed off to the side. They send him. We all know the story that King David was a shepherd. It was a dangerous job. They sent him hoping he'd get eaten by a wolf. That's what they were hoping for him, right? Comes time, Samuel, the son, so Shmuel is the son of Hannah. I forgot to tell you, she does get pregnant. I did tell you she got pregnant, she has a baby. The prophet Samuel. Samuel is now given the job by God to go anoint the next king of Israel. So Samuel goes to the house and says to Ishai, the father, I got to anoint your sons. So he lines up his older sons, and Samuel assumes he knows, so he goes over to anoint the oldest one, and God says, did I tell you to anoint that guy? No, I did not. So he goes like, wait, fine. So he's looking at each one, he's walking by each one, and God's not telling him to anoint any of them. So he turns to Ishai and he's like, is there somebody missing? And Ishai says, yeah, but like, I don't think that's going to be your guy. And Shmuel says, bring him. So David comes in, and God says, yeah. So now David is anointed the king of Israel. So he's had the whole growing up years, he's suffering, right? Now he's anointed the king. Yay, the king! Only what happens? Nobody recognizes him as king. He's got a small band of people who recognize that he's king. Only the current king, Shaul, wants to kill him. So now he's running for his life from his best friend's father, somebody who he loves. And now he's running for his life. So what kind of a life is that? Where he knows he's the king of Israel. There's so many more stories about this. He knows he's the king of Israel. Fast forward, skipping a lot of his stories. He's living as the king in his palace. And one of his sons tries to usurp, his own son tries to do him in and usurp the kingship. So is this a hard life? Is this a life of grief? You know, you think, oh, the king, he's got everything, he's got wives and money, and he's got, but he's living a life of constant challenge, and yet he's the one, his remedy for all of the persecution and all of the hard times, his remedy is to praise God through these songs, through these poetries. And how can we do that in our lives? How can we praise Master of the universe? How can we praise the divine, the oneness, all that is, was, and shall be? In our heart, so we're ending kind of with the hardest one. How do you say thank you for something that's really painful? So I think each one of us can, this is a mature audience. Each one of us can look in our lives and look at something that was really hard that happened in our past and say, wow, I really like who I became from that. So we don't want to repeat it. We wouldn't wish it on anybody, but we like who we are because of that. So we can say thank you. Thank you, God, for giving me the exact experience that I need to become what I need to become. I kind of have a feeling like you and I might need to talk more about this after. I don't know. So those are the 6 stories that I wanted to share with you, and I think we're doing great time-wise because we started late, and I think we're going to end nicely. I talked about how the Ramchal talks about how this going down is sort of a constant, natural way for a human to go, and that what we need to do is take ourselves up and up and up. And the idea is not just to feel okay from our challenges, but to actually rise up into joy from our challenges. So that's kind of almost another kind of a paradox, but it's something that we do by choosing it, by saying, I will choose it. I will choose what's good, and I will choose to go higher. So we need sometimes paradigm shifts. I could spend longer talking about this, and maybe I will. So a lot of times you hear, do what makes you happy. Just do what makes you happy. And what happens is that people start chasing stuff, or they start chasing experiences, because they think that thing is going to make them happy. But the real secret of happiness is that we generate it from within. It's a place within ourselves that we hold ourselves. So, and the idea is, don't do the thing that makes you happy. Do the thing that is good, and be happy in that goodness. Does that make sense? This it contradicts a lot of what we see in the popular media. But the idea is to do what is good, and from that place of good, allow yourself to be happy from there. So there's a teacher online that you can find. Her name is Shifra Hendry, and I just saw a thing that she did that I thought was really nice. And she said it so succinctly. She said, our challenges are opportunity to turn darkness into light. So in a way, we're kind of like these alchemists. We get these dark experiences, and we can transform them into light-filled experiences. And in so doing, we change the world. This is so big and so significant. She asks a couple of questions. She says, what if this happened, this not great experience happened in order to empower you? What if that was true? What if the hard stuff happens in order to empower us? How would that change you? So again, we make this shift in our own minds, like, okay, this hard thing that just happened came really to empower me. She has this other thing, I do want to say. She has this other thing, I just thought it was the coolest thing. She said, what if you came from another world, and you came with a mission to do in this world, and you were dropped into a swamp with amnesia. So you're in the swamp, you don't remember that you're from another world, and you don't remember that you have a mission. So that's kind of like, I guess, her metaphor for what happens for us. We're dropped into this world, we have a mission, we don't necessarily remember what our mission is exactly, but the idea is to get out of the swamp and to rise and to accomplish. So I want to just do a really, does anybody have any questions? And nobody. Okay. Maybe after. So I just want to do a fast recap of the tools that we learned. So from this whole night, I don't expect anybody, like, these are seeds that we're planting, and maybe there's like a little nugget that you will grab onto, and I hope that you will, and just take one of these nuggets and practice it this week and see what happens. We learned from Leah's pain, we learned the remedy of gratitude. So to say thank you. For sure to say thank you for the things that are easy to say thank you for. And I just, for your experimentation, try saying thank you for the hard stuff. Yehuda and Tamar, for Tamar's remedy for her humiliation was silence and grace. And remember that when you're in that position, that you can act, that the heavens are opening, ask. And for Yehuda's humiliation for something that he did wrong, his was to rise up, to fess up and to rise up. For Aharon, he had great loss, and his remedy was a different kind of silence. It was the introspective silence. It was that still small voice, and that what he did from that was to tap into his relationship with his Creator and rise and rise. Hannah's pain was infertility, or for us, lack, and her remedy was prayer. So this is where we open up in any language at any time. You don't have to be in any particular. A forest is a great place to do it. A synagogue is a great place. Your house is a great place. And the 4 parts of prayer are recognize who you're talking to, praise your Creator, ask for everything, and thank for everything. The next one was Ruth. Ruth's pain was loss, and her remedy was certainty. She had a certainty that she was on the right track and that she was walking the right path. So the idea for us is to have that faith in what we know is good and right, and just take the next step. Just take one more step. David, Melech Israel, so his pain was endless. I don't know if anybody suffered like David suffered. And he never stopped praising God. So we have this, and by the way, each one of those Tehillim was a song. So sing, bring song into your life. Like maybe that could be the remedy. And one of the things that to wrap it up, in my studies of all of the characters of the Torah and the Tanakh, the women, as I wrote this book about the women, what I understood was that there are no men without women, and there are no women without men. We're partners in this journey. And what I found that was so astounding to me, that the mission is to build the nation, and there's a reason we're building a nation, because the nation's mission is to bring light into the world, to bring the pleasure of a relationship with the Creator, this oneness that we have the possibility of feeling. So we're builders also. We're part of this, and each one of us is building something, and each one of us is revealing light into this world, and it's so important. So I want to just bless us that each one of us finds the way to come to joy, the way to rise above our pain and to feel our pain, to understand the gift within our pain, to follow in the footsteps of our matriarchs and our patriarchs and all of our ancestors, and walk this gorgeous pathway with so much joy. Thank you.